Okay, in this second part of our first example problem, so this is the second part of uh, looking at the tax imposed on consumers. Now we're going to be looking at consumer surplus, producer surplus, deadweight loss, and tax revenue. So first off, I'm going to start by looking at the consumer surplus by highlighting it on the graph. So remember, even though we have this shift, consumers are still willing to pay the demand curve. The demand curve still represents the willingness to pay by consumers. And our consumer surplus is found by going along the demand curve, along the consumer's willingness to pay, down to the amount they're actually paying. And in this case, it's going to be the $39 as a result of the tax. We're not going all the way down to equilibrium because the tax has the tax has affected the quantity being sold in the market and thus the prices in the market. So we're starting going down along the demand curve until we get to the price consumers are actually going to be paying, which is 39. We go down along this price and then we go right back up to where we started. And so we get this triangle, this blue highlighted triangle is going to be our representation for consumer surplus in the market. So to find the consumer surplus, we're just going to find the area of this triangle. In setting up for this video after the previous video, notice I wrote down or I typed out a couple of points here. So this is the coordinate point for the quantity, the quantity being traded and the price the consumers are paying. Written as a coordinate point, that's going to be 12, the quantity 12, and the price 39. And then down here, I have the point for the price the producers are going to be receiving at a quantity of 12. They're going to be receiving $29 so that we get the coordinate point 12.29. And we'll get to the equilibrium point in a bit, but I'm taking note of what these two coordinates are because we are going to need them to calculate our areas here. So back to consumer surplus. I'm just gonna delete these to save some space. So consumer surplus after the tax is represented by this blue triangle we've highlighted. We're going to need to find the area, and so that's going to be 1/2 times base times height. Our base is going to be our quantity traded as usual. So our base is going to be 12 units in this case. Our height is going to be found by taking the intercept up here, which is 75. We see that from our equation. PB is 75 minus 3QB. At a quantity of 0, the price is going to be 75. So we have 75 down to 39. Our height is going to be the difference of those two values. 75 minus 39 equals 36. So now that we have our base and our height, we can just plug those values in and we'll get the consumer surplus is going to be 1/2 times a base of 12 times a height of 36, which is going to be 216. So that's our consumer surplus. Now we're going to go down and look at our producer surplus. So producer surplus, we're going to remember is going to be going along the supply curve up until we get to the price that the producers are going to be receiving. Then we go down along the price and back to where we started originally. And we're just going to fill in this triangle here. And so this triangle is going to be representing the producer surplus. And again, it's a triangle. We're going to calculate it just as we normally do. It's going to be 1/2 times base times height. And again, our base is going to be the quantity traded in the market, which is in this instance is going to be 12 units. Our height is going to be the difference between the price they're receiving and the price at which they would not be producing the market, the y-intercept, which is in this case 5 units. So we're going to be getting 29 minus 5 equals 24. And now we just plug those values in. So we have 1/2 times 12 times 24. It's going to give us 144, and that's going to be our producer surplus. Now the tax revenue. When we're looking, now we're going to find the tax revenue generated by the tax. And when we're looking at our picture here, we notice there's something different this time. There's this gap. Normally, previously, we've seen the consumer surplus and the producer surplus end up being like right next to each other. They sort of share a side, the two triangles share a side. But here we have this gap right here. And this is this is going to be representing the tax revenue. This is the money that the producers, or this is the money that the consumers are paying, but the producers have to send away to the government due to the tax. So this is the money that the consumers are paying, and that is being, instead of being given to the producers, is being paid, is going to paying this tax. So the tax revenue is going to be represented by this rectangle here. And area of a rectangle is just going to be base times height. And let's see, I'm going to put tax revenue as TR. So the area of a rectangle is just base times height. Our base, again, is going to be the quantity traded in the market. And our height is going to be the difference between what the consumers are paying and what the producers are receiving. And the difference between what the consumers are paying and what the producers are receiving, is, we can calculate that out. 39 minus 29 is $10. And note, the $10 is actually what the tax is. So the tax revenue, put another way, is given by the amount of units being traded in the market times the tax imposed on the market. So our tax revenue is going to be 12 units being traded times a tax of $10 per unit is $120. And that's going to be our tax revenue. Now, our last bit is the deadweight loss. So as we saw in price controls, when the market is affected such that we move away from equilibrium, there is a loss of surplus in the market. Yeah, so normally we would have this whole area being our consumer surplus and this whole area being our producer surplus. And so this area is completely filled in. But in this case, our consumer surplus, our producer surplus, and even the tax revenue doesn't completely fill in the whole spot to equilibrium, because there's this quantity that normally would be traded that is no longer being traded in the market. And so we have this little triangle on the edge that is going to be representing our deadweight loss. In fact, let me label these: our consumer surplus, our producer surplus, our tax revenue, and this little triangle is our deadweight loss. And so to find, this triangle here, to find our deadweight loss, is going to be 1/2 base times height. And so we have these 2 points here. The height of this, again, is going to be the tax, the difference between what the producers pay and what the consumers pay and what the producers receive. So the height in this case is going to be our tax. Deadweight loss equals 1/2 times base times height. We'll find our base in a second. Since our height is already here, it's easy to find. So I'm just going to put our height while we have it. And now for our base. So our base is going to be the length along here from the point down to, from the furthest point down to the side. And this point here is the quantity that would be traded in equilibrium, which is 14. On this graph, I can read it easily, but if you need to find that, you're just going to set the original, you're just going to find the equilibrium quantity. You won't need to find the equilibrium price. You're just going to set the original demand curve equal to the supply curve and find that original quantity equal at equilibrium. So our base is just going to be the difference traded at equilibrium versus now under the tax. That's just going to be 2. Our height we already found is going to be the tax itself. And so our deadweight loss, the area of our deadweight loss is going to be given by 1/2 times the base of 2 times the height, which is the tax. And so we get 10 for our deadweight loss in this instance. So that covers everything I have for the instance of a tax being imposed on the consumers. I'm going to start a new video to go over the tax being imposed on the producers, and that one will likely also be 2 parts just to make sure I don't have to rush too fast to get through it all.